Okay, gonna try. These are some primed empty cases. I'm gonna give this Millennium the old hammer test, like so. See if I can get those to go off. See if I can even get them in. Of course I can't. So, primed case, no powder, no bullet. So while you're watching me whack away at the back of this Taurus, I'll point out that the SIG 320 had a drop safe issue that initially appeared to be the same kind of problem. If dropped on the back of the slide, the trigger would travel all the way to the rear, which, in doing so defeats all the safety mechanisms, and then that would fire a round. Striker is still cocked back all the way. It's not in double action mode, this is single action mode. However, a lot of testers then took the SIG 320 and similar designs, such as the Honor Defense Honor Guard pistol, and realized that they could get them to go off just by hitting the back of the slide with a small hammer. So in this case, I'm smacking the hell out of this thing with a rubber mallet, and it's not going off. Now, I was pretty sure, based on my testing, that the issue was not that the striker would drop because of shock to the pistol. The way I initially tested this was to drop the pistol unloaded from a height of about 6 feet onto the back of the slide, onto either a carpeted floor or wooden floor, and I could tell that the striker had released, because the trigger would revert from single action to double action, which means that the striker was released somehow. I couldn't reproduce that same test with the manual safety on, which suggested to me that the reason that the striker was releasing was that the trigger was traveling all the way to the rear and dropping it. So I already know that if I drop this pistol with the manual safety off onto the back of the slide, I can get the striker to release. The reason to hit it with the hammer is to see if there is another issue that allows the striker to drop with the trigger remaining still. In the case of the Taurus, there is a firing pin block that is only disabled when the trigger moves to the rear. So in theory, even if hitting the back of the slide with a hammer, even if that did cause the striker to drop, it would only drop so far as the firing pin block and would not set off the cartridge if the gun was in good working order. Alright, let's continue. There are two famous videos of Taurus's malfunctioning on YouTube. One of them is a Brazilian PT 24/7 police or military issue Taurus that fires when being shaken. That issue is very clearly a manufacturing problem. If your gun does that, you'll know right away. I mean, that thing would look like rubble inside if it was to do that. There's a couple of things that could cause that, but it's not related to the drop safety issue at all. The other issue is this one. This video and the Shakefire video are both put out by AL.com, and they are one of the news organizations that ran stories about this Taurus drop safety problem. And they have this video, see what happens when you drop a loaded Taurus pistol. And a lot of people say this is conclusive proof that the gun is extremely dangerous. Other people say that this video is obviously fake. Let's take a look at it here. Alright, let's take a look. This is a pretty brief one. It's just 3 quick clips here. About 21 seconds long, 3 really short little clips. So this first one, alright, there we go. Now you can see this gun in frame. This is a Generation 1 PT-111 Millennium. Not a Pro, just a Millennium. They had not added the Pro to the name yet. So, the key thing to think about in this case, this drop, 1, the manual safety is on. That's important. Second thing to keep in mind is that the original Gen 1 Millennium Pro, there have been 3 generations of Millennium Pro, and then there's the new G2, which is actually the 4th gen. So this is a PT-111 Millennium, the very original model from the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever that was. This gun is double action only. These have a long, heavy trigger pull. I am very surprised that the trigger has enough inertia to travel all the way to the rear against this long, heavy double action trigger pull. On the 3rd generation Millennium Pro, as well as the PT 24/7 series, the trigger is single action with restrike capability. You can't decock it, so you can never actually carry it in that double action mode, and the only time you'll ever experience the double action mode truly is if you have a dud round, which is extremely unlikely. So for all intents and purposes, the 1st and 2nd generation Tauruses were double action only, and the 3rd generation and the PT 24/7 were effectively single action. So this gun is double action, and the manual safety is on. And let's take a look at it go. Alright, so it hits the back. You can see the manual safety flaps a little bit. That's just because there's weight going behind it. You can see that trigger travels effortlessly to the rear, and that's something that I already talked about earlier in the video. The original issue and the original recall of these guns was because you can put this manual safety on when the trigger is partly pulled. There's basically no other gun ever made that lets you do that. So in this case, the fact that that trigger is traveling to the rear, even though the manual safety is on, means that either this gun is completely hashed inside, like there's just nothing left, it's a shredded pile of garbage, or it means that they actually did. They began pulling the trigger, then put the manual safety on, then release the trigger again. And now, I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because obviously the fact that that can happen is pretty bad, since nobody would expect it, because it doesn't happen in pretty much any other gun. However, it's worth pointing out that if you have that manual safety on properly, the trigger cannot move like this, and that's what's causing this gun to discharge. And if we keep going, frame by frame, see that little flash? Let's just play this one all the way through. Bang. There's that flash. Now they're going to try to show it to us in close-up. Not a high-quality slow-motion camera that they used. That's fine. So yeah. Alright. Closer look here. You can see this says Millennium on the slide. It does not say Pro. It has the old-style smooth-sided grips and the front strap and back strap checkering. So this is Generation 1 Millennium, non-Pro. And there you go. Trigger flaps to the rear. Goes off, theoretically. Trigger does not return, and that's because if that manual safety is on, the trigger's dead. It can't reset. Normally, if that manual safety was off, that trigger would have shot back forward under the return spring. Because it is double action only, it would have just bounced right back forward. But it's basically in kind of a screwed up dead mode because this manual safety is on. And they used a primed case if they did this legitimately, which I'm not saying they did or they didn't. But this probably would have been a primed case, not a real bullet. Regardless, the slide would not have moved because the manual safety is on. And on these guns, the manual safety locks the travel of the slide. Alright, let's go to the next one. This one is a PT 24/7. So this one is single action, double action. But again, that double action is not real. You will never see that in practical terms. So this one is, again, falling out of the back of the slide. You can see the manual safety is not on. And there we go. It hits. Trigger flaps. You can see that the trigger did return because the manual safety wasn't locking it. So the trigger is functional on this one. And then presumably it goes off. And that is expected. That is what I can confirm from the design, from dropping it. The trigger has enough inertia to flap to the rear, disable all the integrated safeties, and fire the gun. If that manual safety had been on, properly applied, that wouldn't have happened. But that is known. And this last one, here we go. This is another 24/7, it looks like. Actually, they have the model numbers listed here. A PT 24/7 in 40 and a PT 24/7 in 45. So, let's watch this one go down. They dropped this one at a different angle, right? And check this out. It's going to hit just on the back of the magazine, or maybe on the back of the backstrap. And watch what happens to the slide here. Notice that the slide unlocked. This isn't recoil. This means the manual safety is off, because the slide would be locked. If the manual safety was on, the slide would be locked in place. It wouldn't move backwards. The slide is unlocked because the inertia of the slide is pushing against the recoil spring. And if we go frame by frame... Oops, a little too fast there. Alright, here it's hit. You can see that the slide has started to move back. The trigger has started to move back, but isn't going as fast as the slide. And if I can just about get to it, you can actually see that before the trigger travels all the way to the rear, the slide has unlocked. So this gun, as far as I can tell, did not fire in this drop test. Because what it looks like happened is the slide unlocked past the point where the gun was out of battery, and the trigger is no longer have an effect. Like I've taken apart these guns and looked inside of them. Not the specific ones in the video, obviously, but the design of the Millennium Pro and the 24/7 series is similar to basically every other gun. When the slide is partially unlocked, the striker can no longer be actuated because the firing pin block is out of position. It can't be deactivated by the trigger. Essentially, the slide unlocks, the gun becomes dead. So this trigger's flapping, but it doesn't mean anything because the slide has unlocked itself. Right? And it has enough inertia to... Oh, they're going to show it to us again. Even slower. Here we go. Alright, there we go. The slide is unlocked. That is far enough. This gun is out of battery. This gun's not going to go off. And then the trigger flaps to the rear. And these have an extremely far back release point, which is one of the biggest criticisms of the Millennium Pro and 24/7 design, is that this trigger breaks really far back. So the trigger breaks here. This gun is already so far out of battery, that trigger's not going to do shit. And you see that trigger bounces back because, again, the manual safety is not on. The trigger is not dead. It has returned to double action mode. Well, and probably to single action mode, because the slide is actually going to cycle enough to reset the trigger all the way. And not quite enough to cycle this primed brass. And now back to the woods for the rest of the video. What does that mean? That means this is not drop safe, because you can drop it and it'll still go off, but it does mean that the issue isn't the same as with a SIG 320. In this case, the issue is the trigger has enough weight, enough inertia to pull itself all the way back. So, single action mode, you got a lot of slack, you got a lot of take up. There we go. So now we're in double action mode. This is way longer, heavier. A lot more weight to that. You cannot carry this gun in double action mode. There's no decocker. So imagine a P99, a Walther P99, or a Konik TP9 DA. Imagine that style of trigger, but with no decocker. So you can carry it like this, with the trigger in single action mode, a light but long pull. You can have the safety on, which blocks the trigger from going to the rear. The issue with these guns, and this is the cause of the original recall, is that the trigger and the safety have a weird interaction where if you start to pull the trigger, you can then put on the safety, and you've got one pull, and then the trigger's dead. And the gun is locked because the safety is on, the slide cannot go to the rear. So if you, for some reason, let's see, now we're in double action mode. If for some reason you pull the trigger part way, put the safety on, that trigger is still live for one shot. So that, combined with the weight of the trigger and the momentum of the trigger, if dropped right on the back of the slide, that trigger can go all the way back to the rear, pull once, and then the gun is locked. It's done. But that's still once. It's firing straight back up into your face, and that's the issue. If, however, you have that manual safety on, and you put it on correctly, the trigger cannot move. It cannot go far enough back to actually do anything. So first of all, cannot actuate the firing pin block. So if the striker were to fall, which as far as I can tell, I can't get it to do that, but if the striker were to fall, it would be blocked by the firing pin block. So the cartridge would not go off. So it travels a part of the way to disengage the firing pin block, and the rest of the way to actually release the striker and fire a round. If you got that manual safety on, trigger can't get far enough back to do either of those things. It is, as far as I can tell, I am not a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, I'm not a scientist, drop safe. What does that mean? Can you carry one of these? No, don't do it. If you have one of these and you like to take it out shooting, because it's an extremely ergonomic gun, accurate-ish, reliable-ish, you know, insofar as a Taurus can be, just keep it. Just keep it and shoot it. They're going to give you a $200 gun as a trade if you send this thing back in, if that. So just keep it. Vector CP1s are worth a lot now, aren't they? Like I said, in the woods, if you have one of these guns and you like it and you want to keep it and keep shooting it, go for it. Just be safe. I mean, be careful with it, because it is not 100% drop safe. It's probably 50% drop safe. So if you have one of these, you want to keep it, you want to take it out to the range, it's not going to fucking blow up, it's not going to shoot a bullet out the back of the slide into your eyeball, you know. Should you continue to carry it, however, no, I don't think you should. If you rely on a Millennium Pro or 24/7 as your daily carry and you cannot get another gun, then maybe you should send it into Taurus, try to take them up on their offer. They may send you a Taurus Millennium PT111 G2. That one is, as far as anybody can tell, drop safe. I don't have one, I haven't screwed around with it yet. I don't think the G2 is as good of a gun as the Gen 2 and especially Gen 3 Millennium Pro, but if you really need a carry gun, you can't get a new one, you know, maybe that's going to be your best option. Basically, I'm trying to provide a voice of reason in all of this, because there's essentially two camps. One camp that says, I fucking knew it, Tauruses are dangerous, and if you look at one sideways, it'll kill you in your sleep. And the other camp of people saying, all these videos are fake, I dropped my gun, it didn't go off, you know, fuck you. They're both wrong to about the same extent. Use your best judgment, be smart about it. I'm not trying to tell you that this gun is completely safe, I'm just trying to explain the exact ways in which it is unsafe, because almost everybody making claims about these guns is doing so probably without a real understanding of the mechanics of the gun. I think people assume that because they're made by Taurus, the guns just have no safety features or are really shoddily made inside, and I can tell you from having taken them apart that they're basically the same as any other striker-fired pistol. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll help you out to the best of my ability. Stay safe. Stay shooting. See you later.